This billionaire thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. The sun shone brightly over Buckingham Palace, its golden rays reflecting off the black lacquer of a Rolls-Royce Phantom as it pulled up to the gates. The crowded square buzzed with the chatter of tourists and the clicking of cameras, but the moment the luxury car's door swung open, heads turned. Richard Coleman, a 55-year-old billionaire, stepped onto the pavement, adjusting the cuffs of his custom-tailored suit. His gold cufflinks gleamed, his Rolex glistened, and a knowing smirk tugged at his lips as he surveyed his surroundings. Behind him, two towering bodyguards, dressed in matching black suits, stood watchful. The businessman's arrival was calculated, as if even a casual stroll demanded an audience. He let out a chuckle, watching the tourists fawn over the British royal guards, taking photos and whispering in awe at their discipline. Richard shook his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "These guys still do this?" His assistant, a thin man with glasses, nervously adjusted his tie. "Sir, the changing of the guard is a major attraction. It's a tradition that—" "Tradition?" Richard scoffed, his voice dripping with amusement. No. This is just a gimmick for tourists." His Italian leather shoes clicked against the pavement as he strode toward a standing royal guard, his smirk widening. The soldier, clad in the traditional red uniform and towering bearskin hat, remained as still as stone. Richard turned to his bodyguards. "I bet I can make him blink." A few tourists looked on, sensing that something was about to unfold. Some whispered, others instinctively raised their phones. Richard clasped his hands behind his back, tilting his head at the guard. "You stand here all day, huh? What's that like? Do you even get to speak?" Silence. The guard's gaze remained locked forward, unwavering. Richard chuckled. "Man, I'd go insane doing this job. You must hate it." Still, no reaction. The billionaire turned to his assistant, feigning offense. "Is he ignoring me? I'm practically royalty myself." A few chuckles rose from the crowd, but there was an undercurrent of unease. The tone in Richard's voice wasn't playful, it was dismissive, condescending. He stepped even closer. "Come on," he said smoothly. "You're standing here in this silly hat. I get it, tradition and all. But you don't have to act like a robot." A hush fell over the crowd. Tourists exchanged glances. Some even pulled their children back, sensing that Richard was pushing the boundaries. But the royal guard? He didn't flinch. And that only made Richard more determined. He had no idea that he was about to make a terrible mistake. Richard's smirk widened as he turned back toward the guard. The silence, the unyielding presence, he found it amusing. "I wonder," Richard mused aloud, stepping even closer. "Do you even feel anything under all that?" He gestured at the guard's pristine red coat. "Or are you just a mannequin with a heartbeat?" The tourists watching the scene grew uneasy. A few murmured warnings under their breath. Others discreetly started recording. Richard, emboldened by the lack of reaction, took another step forward. He now stood inches from the guard's face. His assistant swallowed hard, shifting on his feet. "Sir, maybe we should." No, no, Richard cut him off, his eyes locked onto the guard's unreadable face. I want to see how far this goes. He lifted a hand and snapped his fingers directly in front of the guard's face. Nothing. Richard scoffed, shaking his head. Wow. Impressive. I mean, I've met CEOs with better poker faces, but this? He chuckled. This is next level. A murmur spread through the crowd. Even Richard's bodyguards exchanged glances, sensing the tension. Then, Richard crossed a line. He reached up and flicked the edge of the guard's bearskin hat. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. A woman covered her mouth, while a man in the back muttered, "Oh, he's done for." Still, the royal guard didn't react. But those who had witnessed similar incidents before knew the stillness wasn't an action. It was calculation. Richard chuckled, oblivious to the growing tension. You guys are really something else, huh? He turned to the crowd. I mean, imagine having a job where you can't even swat a fly off your face. His laughter faded when he turned back and noticed the guard's stance had subtly shifted. Richard wasn't laughing anymore. The businessman had just set something into motion. A chill crept up Richard's spine as he watched the guard subtly adjust his stance. The once immovable statue now carried an air of controlled precision, like a lion waiting to strike. The crowd, sensing the shift, went silent. Richard, still refusing to back down, chuckled nervously. Come on, it's just a joke, he muttered. Don't tell me you. Before he could finish, the royal guard moved. With one sharp, fluid motion, he took a forceful step forward, his rifle shifting to a readied position. The metallic clang of his boot hitting the pavement echoed through the square. Stand back, the guard's voice thundered, his command slicing through the air like a whip. Richard's confidence shattered. His feet stumbled backward, nearly losing balance as he scrambled to put distance between himself and the suddenly imposing figure before him. His smirk vanished, replaced with wide-eyed shock. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Some whispered in approval. Others held their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Richard, breathless, looked around for his bodyguards. But they weren't intervening. They knew better than to challenge a royal guard. For the first time, Richard felt small. The once arrogant billionaire had finally met someone he couldn't buy, intimidate, or outmaneuver. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The guard's movements were swift, controlled, military precision in action. As Richard stumbled back, the guard held his position, his rifle firm in his grip. The sheer authority in his stance sent a clear message. This was no act. Richard's hands trembled. He had spent decades commanding boardrooms, closing deals, and getting his way. Yet here, in front of a soldier sworn to discipline, he was powerless. The crowd, now entirely silent, watched the scene unfold. Some held up their phones, capturing the billionaire's downfall. Then, security arrived. A pair of uniformed officers stepped into the space. "Sir, step back immediately," one of them ordered, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. Richard swallowed hard, realizing he had no choice but to comply. The moment security arrived, Richard's confidence crumbled. A firm hand gripped his shoulder. "Sir, step back immediately," one of the officers commanded. The crowd had grown larger, their phones raised, capturing every humiliating second of his downfall. His once loyal bodyguards now stood idle, knowing there was nothing they could do against protocol and military authority. "Sir, you have violated the rules of conduct regarding the Queen's Guard," the officer continued. "I suggest you leave immediately." Richard's face burned with embarrassment. He turned to his assistant, but the man only looked down, unwilling to intervene. Muttering under his breath, Richard adjusted his cuffs, feigning composure as he took a step back. "This is ridiculous," he hissed, forcing a smirk that no longer held its usual confidence. The Royal Guard? Unmoved. Unshaken. Unbothered. As Richard turned to walk away, the weight of the moment finally settled in. He had strutted in, believing his wealth and power made him untouchable, only to be humbled by a soldier who refused to break discipline. The crowd applauded as he was led away, and as the last camera shutter clicked, Richard knew his reputation had just taken a hit that no amount of money could fix.